Hi there, welcome. This week we are going to be working with JavaScript and adding a JavaScript powered Lightbox, sort of like a photo gallery, to a web page. There's obviously more information on eCentennial. JavaScript is a huge topic in and of itself. What JavaScript is compared to, say, HTML and CSS, JavaScript is used to add functionality and interactivity, sometimes animations and effects to our web pages. There's tons and tons out there, but luckily, and there's lots of, like, you can write your own JavaScript, but you're essentially becoming a developer at that point. But luckily, there are lots of little JavaScript, almost like plugins that have been pre-written that we can, non-developers can fairly easily put on a web page and use. It does take a little bit of setup and a little bit of trial and error, but that's what we'll look at today. So, let's get started. There's been 2 files uploaded to eCentennial that we'll be working with today. JavaScript example site and Lightbox JavaScript files. So let's unzip the first one and see what we have here. And this is a website, the beginnings of a website. We've got our index HTML file. We've got a CSS folder. In that folder, we have the normalized and skeleton CSS. We will be using the skeleton framework for this exercise. So it's already there. We have an images folder with that essentially has nothing in it, just a fav icon in it right now. And let's open up that index file. I'm going to open it up with Visual Studio. You can use whatever text editing software you prefer. And as we'll see here, it's got, it's pretty well empty. The body is completely empty. What do we have at the top? We've got meta name, description, content introducing the Lightbox JavaScript photo gallery. Author, let's just fill that out right now. Oh, doing that wrong first. That's author is the name of the field and the content is my name. And it's loading, it's already loading the 2 CSS files for us, which is great. I'm going to add one more. Well, you know what, I'll do that later. So I'm going to save that just so I get that metadata in there. And obviously, if I returned and double click that on Chrome, it's an empty HTML document. So let's take a look at what is in that other zip folder. Lightbox JavaScript files. I unzip that. That contains one folder named dist. And when I look in there, I see CSS, a folder with CSS that has 2 CSS files in it, a folder with some images, and a folder titled JS. And that is for JavaScript. And in there is a series of JavaScript files. This parent folder, dist, is it stands for distribution. It's a naming convention that many developers use as they work on a project. And it might be in beta, it might not be ready for release. When it's ready to be released or distributed, they will collect the files in a folder called dist. So first thing that we need to do is we add our JavaScript files to our website files, and then we have to tell our HTML document to load those JavaScript files, very similar to the way we load CSS files. So all we're going to do right now is take this entire dist file and either drag it, or you can right click and hit, copy, or oops, with it selected, you could go edit, copy, whatever you need, whatever works best for you. I'm just going to drag it, this entire folder, into that JavaScript example site, so my website folder. I'm not going to put it in any of the folders in there. I'm going to, oh, view kind of shifted on me. I'm going to have it sit beside the CSS folder and the images folder. So it's on the same level. It can be tempting to say, oh, here are some CSS files, and here are some image files. I'm going to drag these out and put them in this CSS file. And I'm going to put the images in this images file. And I don't know what I'm going to do with the JS file. Maybe I'll leave it there. It's best practice just to leave this as is. The CSS files and the images files, they are being accessed by these JavaScript files. We're not going to access these files in our HTML. Only the JavaScript is going to, and same with the images. It's best just to leave the distribution folder, the dist folder, just leave it alone, drag it onto the website, and don't start moving these around out of it. Leave whatever's in that folder, leave it where it is. That's pretty important. So let's return back to our HTML. So in our CSS section, we've loaded the normalize and we've loaded the skeleton CSS. We do need to load the CSS for the JavaScript. So when we run the JavaScript, it will have access to its CSS and be able to start styling things the way it wants to style. So it's the exact same as the line above, link relationship equals style sheets, href equals, so the path to that style sheet. This is where it's going to get a little different because it's not in the CSS folder. It's in the distribution folder. So we're going to select that. Then we're going to select the CSS. And here, let's select the, we can select either ones. This one has just been sort of optimized and minimized, so it takes up slightly less space. Let's load that one. So we've loaded that, the Lightbox CSS that the JavaScript requires to run properly. So we've loaded it as if it's a normal CSS document, essentially is. But we've just, the path is slightly different because we're going into that distribution folder first. And we can close that. The next thing we're going to do is load the JavaScript itself. So the same way that we've loaded these CSS documents, we're going to load the JavaScript. Some people load it at the top of the page in the head. Sometimes it's loaded at the bottom. Sometimes you'll hear the argument be made to that, because sometimes JavaScript can be quite a large file, that they load the script at the bottom of the page, so the rest of the page has time to load in case that loading that JavaScript takes a few seconds. I don't think this will take that long. We are posting this look, but let's do it properly as if this was real world, and we are looking at really at mobile first. So let's kind of do the right thing. We'll load it at the bottom of the page. I shouldn't say the right thing, but the decision, the way that some people feel is the optimal way for page load time. So we will load it at the bottom. So I'm going to go way down to the bottom of my page, short page, that's not very far, but I'm still within the head section. Put one little space in there. I'm sorry, I'm still within the body section. So I'm the bottom of my body section. And I do my angle brackets and I type script. So this is telling the HTML document, let's load, it's time to load a script. We're going to load a script. And then like, kind of like what we've done before, almost like when, I guess when we're loading an image, we do source, SRC, to tell it, okay, so where is this script? Source equals quotation marks. And again, it's giving us these shortcuts. We know the JavaScript is in the dist folder. We know the JavaScript is in the JS folder for JavaScript. And again, we have a few here. For this one, we are going to also load the second one down. So it's Lightbox plus jQuery.min.js. So jQuery, and there's information about on this online, jQuery is a JavaScript framework or boilerplate. And so that's available to all developers to use as a starting point. It has some core functionality, similar to the Skeleton CSS framework. And then what the developer of this Lightbox plugin has done is he's leveraged that jQuery framework to build his own jQuery, it's called a plugin, jQuery script. So this is what we're loading here is JavaScript that is both the Lightbox plus the jQuery, because it needs the jQuery as well. Again, it's been minimized, shrunk down as much as possible, .js file. And then we close that bracket and we automatically get the closing script tag. And that's actually, we can leave. We're not going to put anything within these tags. We just leave it like that. So again, you could put this in the head area. We put it at the bottom just to optimize the page as most as possible. So we have, I'm going to save that. We have our HTML document. It's loading our CSSs. It's loading the CSS for our plugin. And then or for our JavaScript, I should say, and then it's loading the JavaScript itself at the bottom. So now we can start putting some content in here. For this exercise, hopefully you have some of your own images. I'm going to go back to my example site here and go into this images folder, not the images folder. Again, we're not touching anything within this folder. So in the sort of root images folder, the main images folder. And I've got a couple over here. I can just grab. I'm going to grab these and I'm going to copy them. Oh, wait, no, where do I want to go? You know what? I'm just going to Control-C, copy them, go back and drop them into that folder. So now I have some images to work with. And let's get started. So in the body section, because we are working with Skeleton, I'm going to open a container. That is the custom class. That's the class that Skeleton likes to wrap your entire page content in. They'll make it responsive and give it borders on the side. And I've left, oops, wrong button. I've left my closing tag at the bottom, and I'm going to work within here. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to create, and this is really just for the exercise. Oops. I'm going to create a sort of an empty div. Height, let's see, 100 pixels, just to, as I've done in other examples, push my content down from the top of the page, because I don't like working right at the top. There we go. So that's an empty div with the style of 100 pixels put on it. So we're working with skeleton. I want to do for my, so I'm going to do 3 images across in a row that when you click on the content of whatever is in that box, when you click on it, the lightbox effect opens up the image. So the first thing I'm going to do is div class equals row for my first skeleton row. Oh, what happened there? Look at that. Sorry, got things a little messed up there. There we go. And again, I want 3 boxes, so I am going to go div class equals, I will do 1/3 column. And so now, and just to see what's going on. Do I have everything closed? Row, yeah, I think I've got everything closed off. I'm going to save that just so we can see what is actually happening there. So there's my text, the beginning of my 1/3 columns. But I don't want text in there just yet. I'm in that first box of my first row, my first 1/3 column box of my first row. And now I want to put some content in there that will open up this lightbox effect. Again, this JavaScript isn't attached to skeleton. I'm just using it here for layout. As a starting point, it would work just without skeleton, work with like any website really. In this case, we're just using them together. So that when the user comes and they see whatever they see, maybe it's text, maybe it's images, and they click on it and that light box opens, they're essentially clicking on something. So that is essentially a link to that image. So the way we start is with an anchor tag. Like any link. And with any link, we want to tell it what is the target. In this case, the target is the image that I wanted to open. So I'm going to go back to images. I'm going to navigate to one of those files that I just dragged over onto my site. So that's the target of this button that we're creating. Now we need to start entering some code that is going to be specific to the JavaScript. It might not make sense to us right now, but it makes sense to the JavaScript. So I'm going to type data hyphen lightbox equals, I'm just going to put image underscore 01. We'll look at this later, what happens when you start changing this, but for now, I'm just going to put data lightbox image 01. Next, I still haven't closed that opening a tag. Next, I'm going to put data title equals, and then quotations. And here we're going to put something that this will appear as a caption under the image. So I believe you could leave this blank if you don't want captions, but you often might, especially if you're using this as a as a portfolio, a demo for your portfolio, then you would you might want to have a description under this. So I'm just going to put some text in here. Cats are the best. And now finally, I'm going to close that anchor tag. So I opened an A tag, an anchor tag. The first thing that I put in there is the href. That is what I want this button to open in the Lightbox. Next, data-Lightbox, I give it a name, and we'll explore this later, but for now, you can honestly really put anything in there. I always recommend to avoid putting spaces in any kind of code, so I use an underscore, and then the data's title, I did put spaces and characters in there because that's actually going to be displayed as text, as a caption under the photo. And now there's the closing anchor tag. Again, I'm going to put text in here for now. I'm going to put link in all caps. So I've wrapped this word in these anchor tags. I'm going to save that, come back, reload. Now it's taken on the default style of the link, and what happens when I click it? So there's that image. That's the image that I was pointing to. You can see there's my caption, cats are the best. And it's triggered the Lightbox. So the screen darkens, the background darkens a bit, and the image fades out. This plugin, you can click on the X or anywhere off. So that's good. That's a good starting point. What else can we do here, though? Often we'll not want. Yeah, should I put in more? No, I'll leave it. I'll keep going with what I was going to. Often we don't want text here. We want an image here. So I'm going to come back. Instead of having the word link, I'm going to put in an image tag. For now, I'm going to go source equals, for now, I'm going to navigate, that was the first one, directly to that image. And I'm just going to go view word wrap so we can see. So this image tag, it's pointing to the exact same image up here, and it's wrapped in these anchor tags. So I'm going to save that and load this and see what happens there. It's loading, but there's obviously some issues with this. I'm pitching a row of 3. This is huge. This image is showing the full size image because that's the default. That's what HTML will always do. Unless you tell it to do something differently, it will always load the full image. So there's a couple ways we can affect this. First thing that we want to do is, well, the one thing that we haven't done here is we haven't created or loaded our own CSS document, so we can start tweaking things ourselves. So let's start with that, because we'd almost always do that. File, new, I guess I'll give it a title. Oops. Custom CSS. And let's save that right away. Is that the one not working in? Yep. Let's save it right here. Away as just what I usually call it, styles.css. And save that there. Next, I'm going to return here and I'm going to cheat, just copy and paste that and change it to styles.css. Save that. So now I've got a CSS page that I load into my document. Now I can start styling this the way I want it to. So right now it will by default load that image to show the whole image at its original size. I want to force it down into that to fit that 1/3 column. It's sitting in a container called that's a 1/3 column. So I want it to fit within that. So let's see. First thing I'm going to do is create a custom class called thumbnail. Let's experiment with, I'm going to go with width 100%. And save that. So if I apply this to the image, it should tell the image to fill 100% of the width of its container. So hopefully this works. I think it might still need some tweaking, but let's get started and see. So image down here, my image source. This is what I was trying to load as a thumbnail or a link, I should say. This is my link. So I'm going to go in there, class equals thumbnail. Save. Let's see what happens. So there you go. It is now fitting into that 1/3 column. And now when I click on it, the image opens. This is okay, but I think there's some issues with this, and we might be able to make this better. You could leave it like this. We'll see as we go on. It might not work exactly as you want. So there's other approaches we're going to take a look at. My one biggest concern about this approach right now is it is to load this image, this small thumbnail. It's loading the full size image. So if you imagine, if we had a grid of images, maybe I'm not even doing a 3-column grid, maybe I'm doing a 4-column or 6-column. I want little tiny thumbnails. And I have 10 or 20 of them on the single page. It would be loading the full size image for every one of those 20 thumbnails and then running it really small. So it's not efficient. It's going to really hurt the page load time because it's loading essentially full res images for little tiny thumbnails. Even though these images, and I should have mentioned this off the top, these images are not like print resolution. They have to be reduced down for web resolution to load properly and to load quickly. But even then, to load an image this big, to display this big, isn't super efficient. We're going to adjust that later, but for now, I just want to get a few more into this document. So this was my first column. I'm going to, again, just cheat and be lazy. It's not cheating. And I'm going to paste 2 more for my 3 images in my first row. So let's look at my second one. In this program, I'm not sure what program you might be using, but in this program, I know I can cheat. If I delete this text right back to that H and I put in a quote, I will get my prompts again. So now I can just navigate to my file that way. Image number 2. I'm going to give it its own caption. I'm going to get controversial. Now, of course, I'm loading an image, a new image, but I'm still loading the original image for the thumbnail, so I need to change that as well. So what I can do is just copy that. So I'm loading the correct image to function as the link. So that one should be done. Change both links, the one that I then linking to, plus the one that I'm using as a thumbnail. Change the data lightbox to image 2 and give it a new caption. And now for my third one, delete down to that first quotation, put it in there, put it, and it prompts me again, and load the next one, image 3. And let's copy that again. So I have the right image linking to the right image. Looks good. Save, come back here and reload. So that opens that. This one opens that one. And this one is opening this one. So again, what do I not like about this is that now I'm already, there's two things I would like to address about this. The one is I am loading full size images to run as small thumbnails. And now I'm loading 3, and I'm going to do more and more rows. So it's just loading more and more files at bigger sizes than they need to be. It's going to make this page load very slowly. I also pictured this more as a grid. The fact that this middle image is a square, and then these images are horizontal, it's throwing off my grid. Now, the one thing that I do want to say that I like about this right now is because this is built on the skeleton framework, and I haven't made any changes to it. As I resize my page down, they're shrinking down and they're staying apart. And then when I get to a certain point, like a phone, they get stacked. And with this still working. So that's great. I love that. But I wanted a grid effect. So this is where I'm going to look at the different way to treat thumbnails. You can, through some, you can force images to appear as squares through the CSS, through this, we can even show you. So let's say I went down here. I'm just going to get rid of this. I'm going to go width 300 pixels, height 300 pixels. So I'm going to force them to be square. And then what is the, is it overflow? No, it's not overflow. It's a command. Oh, can't remember what the command is now. Give me 1 second, because I have it in a file. Right. That's the thing with CSS. You forget the commands. That's it. Now I remember. Now I remember. Object fit. That's what we're after, not overflow. Overflow is for text. Oops. Object. Well, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to leave it like this. So first, I'm going to just force those squares to be 300 pixels. Looks, hey, they're square now, but these are stretched. And that's where we use the object fit and its cover that we want. Save that, come here, reload, and now they're not squished. It's saying like how to fit this out. So the object that we're trying to fit into this, I've told it to be 300 by 300, so I've made it to be square. The object that I was trying to fit into that square was not shaped as a square, they're rectangles. So by default, it squishes it into the square, but the object fit command cover basically tells it like to crop it, to cover the space and just cut off whatever isn't there. This looks great. I might be very happy with this. There's still there's two problems with it. The one is still the original problem where these images are still way too big than they need to be. And the other problem is by forcing these thumbnails to be 300 by 300 pixels, it starts to break the responsiveness. I'll show you what I mean. Now as they come down, before they were shrinking, the skeleton CSS was shrinking those images in scale. Now things get really weird, and then it works at the end. But now actually they're like kind of small. They were bigger before, filling that space more. This is a huge problem. And then it looks okay from here on. So it's not a great solution. It's surprisingly very difficult to make responsive square shapes in CSS. It involves containers within containers, and we're not going to look at it today. And we still wouldn't avoid that problem if we were loading these images that are way too big. It seems like it might be extra work, and it is extra work, but in the long term, it's for the best. Really, the best thing to do here in this situation is to not link to the actual image, but to create a thumbnail version of that image. So I'm going to come back to my folder. I'll start with this one, basket, open with Photoshop. It takes a little bit of time up front, but in the long run, it pays off. And realistically, you're not doing it that often, especially if it's a portfolio site and you're updating it. So I would open this in Photoshop, use my crop tool. In this case, I want a square, so I have the default square, and now I can just drag it. It also gives me the opportunity to like fine tune. The other thing about what we have here, where the CSS is cropping the images, it's going to crop it off the sides equally. And if your subject is on the side, it might get cropped. Like you'll have no control over how that crop appears. In this case, I have full control. So I might want it even closer. Crop. I should check the image size. Let me just double check. Showing me in centimeters, but okay. Now can I do pixels? There we go. 300, sure. Well, I can. 300 seems a little small. I'm gonna make it 500. I know I'm increasing the resolution here, which I probably do, but I'm gonna make it a little bit bigger, just for high-res screens. Save that. Save as. So in that folder, it's already called basket. I'm going to slip in _ thumb. This is where naming conventions become very important. So you establish a naming convention, and it'll be easy to navigate, easy to code. I'm going to create thumbnails for all my images, and they'll always be crop square, and they're always going to have the underscore thumb after. So I'm going to save that there. Sure, you can shrink it down more if you want. Close that. Return to my code here. I'm going to go back to how I had this originally. So 100%, filling 100% of the width of that container. And now back in my HTML, I go to that first entry, and I know because I have a naming convention, I load the basket underscore thumb as that placeholder. Save, come here, reload. And because I've gotten rid of that CSS that was making it 300 by 300 pixels, this image on the end has reverted back to its normal state, whereas this now looks like the square thumbnail that I want. And when I shrink it down, it shrinks as well. And then when we go into phone, now it's filling the side equally. So it's a little bit more production work. And if these were all shrunken down like this, they're going to load a lot faster. This image is already a square, so it's kind of throwing this off a little bit. But you can imagine this if we had vertical images, how that would start affecting things. Like if we really want that grid effect, it's kind of worth, it is definitely worth both for page load time and also just for kind of greater control is creating thumbnails for your image, and then you can create them all the exact same size, and you're not trying to force things with the CSS. You're working with thumbnails that are all the same size and shape, and it'll make it so much easier. So I have so you're not watching me run Photoshop for a few minutes. I have already created them. So I'm going to go into my images. I've created, I have a number of images here for more of the exercise. So I'm going to grab just all the ones that I need, drag them over. Just keep both. All right, because I already did those. And I keep both. I just have a few here. Sorry, just need some copy. Don't need those. So as you can see, I've got, there's my original image, there's a thumbnail. I've got my third image. I've already created the thumbnail. It's also a square. There's my other one. I've created a thumbnail. It's a little bit closer. So I've just already done the work. It really doesn't take that long. Once you just load them all into Photoshop, you whip through them in 5 minutes. All I need to do now is I'm just going to go in and add, again, because I have a consistent naming structure, thumb after all those images that I'm loading as a placeholder, come back, save, return, and there we go. Now everything is nice and responsive. Everything's looking like a nice grid. And it's starting to come together. That is my first row. This particular plugin there's another function that we can add to this, which is an idea of kind of grouping images. And so for that, I'll show you what I mean by that. We are going to return to our HTML. So again, as we remember, Did I close that row? Didn't. Let's see here. I think I'm missing a closing div tag. Yeah, that's right. Okay, so that's good. So here is my row. That was for everything that I just put in. That first row, I'm going to create a new one. So div class equals row. That first div class equals 1/3, oops, quotations, 1/3 column. And all right, so then what do we do in here? We're going to do a link, again, because our target is an image. Going to images, what do we got next here? I'll just do in alphabetical, so cat food JPEG, that's our target. Space, data, lightbox. And this is where we're going to create this idea of a set of images. So in data lightbox, I'm going to put set underscore or image, right? We'll say image set 01. Again, it doesn't matter what you call it, but I like to call it something that might mean something to me. So image set 01. Data title, again, I'm not gonna bother putting things in here. Test content. And I've got my closing anchor tag. Now I'm going to do image source equals image source equals, there we go. This was cat food, so cat food thumb. I should mention off the top, so for accessibility reasons, the images within the lightbox, when they're actually expanded, don't have the option to have alt text. But in this view, the thumbnails, there's no reason why it couldn't have alt text here. So, again, I'm just going to put test content. So we can apply alt text and should apply alt text to the thumbnails at the very least. So is that our first one? Let's hit save, return, just make sure everything's okay. Ooh, something, oh right, because I didn't add my class to my image. Image class equals thumbnail. Save. There we go. And it's loading. That's fine. But as I mentioned, I wanted to do a set here. So, see what I mean. I'm going to just copy this again to populate that row, my second row. And I'm going just to hop in here and put new images in. So images, what did we do? Cat food. So we're going to go exercise. I can go down here. Exercise thumb. And leave everything the same. And then finally, my third image, exercise. I guess on bed image, on fed thumb, and that is my second row complete. The important thing here to create a set. So in this first row, so the data lightbox image was 01, the second image was image 02, third image that was image 03 for data lightbox equals. In this case, data lightbox equals image set 01 for all three entries. They're identical. This is going to link them together. And I'll show you what I mean. Save, come back, reload. It looks pretty much essentially the same. If I click on that, I get my image. If I click on this, I get my image. But there's one thing that's different now. You can see there's left and right arrows on this image. If I click left or back, I'm now back at that first image that I put in that set. Next is back to this one, and then finally, next is to that one. So by setting those as being within the same set, they now have become kind of like they're grouped like a set, and you can go through them if you want. And that is by making sure that the data lightbox image, or sorry, data lightbox information or entry for those three images are the same. If I took this and pasted it on the first three, they would all become one link. You could open the first image and go through all 6 images, if that's what you wanted. What else? I want to show, sort of related to that, one way that we can actually kind of refine that a little bit. We want to get even a little trickier with this, and this might be appropriate for a portfolio site. So I'm going to create another row. Yeah, I'll create another row. Div class equals row. Div class equals 1/3 column. And sort of things are going to get a little different. Sort of the same, but also a little different. So I'm going to just work within that one column for now. I'm going to take, I'll type the first one out. href. So again, it's an anchor because it's a link to the image itself. And let's go to the last one, Pizza Cat. Data, lightbox, image, set 02. Because I don't want this to be part of the other ones, but I want to create a new one. And then data title equals test content. And then image source equals, I don't like it when it doesn't give me the prompt. Getting lazy. So Pizza Cat thumbnail. And close that. So there we go. And save that. Return, reload. Again, I forgot again to apply my class equals thumb. Nail. So there's my last link. So that's, again, just a standard one-off image. I'm going to add 2 more images to this 1/3 column. So up until now, every image in both examples, every image is by itself within the 1/3 column. Each square has only one image in it. One little trick, a way that we can start refining this is, I'm going to stay within this 1/3 column. I'm not going to open up a new one. And I'm going to put in another image. So exact same way, just going to copy and paste so I don't have to type it all. And actually, I'm going to put in 2. Cat food, oh, that's kind of gross. I'll put this one in. Now, if I left it like that, I feel like it would probably break because I'm trying to force too much. I'm going to see what happens. Yeah, it's breaking. It's running it. Yeah, did I put the? Oh, I put 2 of the same ones. So I'm going to delete that. I want something different. Here, I'll just grab this one. Save. So again, because I'm trying to I'm forcing this into 3 images into 1 column, it's stacking them within that column. So this is a little trick that might be appropriate for your work. This first one has been the standard. There's my anchor tag, and there's my image tag. Rats. There's my image tag, where I'm loading that image into that spot. For the second and third image, I'm just going to delete that image. I'm gonna not have it load that image. So let's remember this. We have Pizza Cat, and we're loading the Pizza Cat thumbnail. Then I'm still within that 1/3 column. Then I'm loading the exercise in the same way. Ooh, but this is important. I have to make that image set 2 to match that first one. So I load Pizza Cat, put it in the Lightbox data is image set 2, and I load the thumbnail for it. Then I've loaded the exercise image, again with the Lightbox data image set 2, but no image. That anchor tag is empty. And then I load a third one, this cat on the bed image, once again with image set 2, and once again with no image. And then I close that 1/3 column. So I'm going to save that, return, come back here. Those images are gone, those ones that were stacked. I can't scroll down anymore. But when I click on this one, I have arrows. And those arrows are loading those ones that I've also placed within that 1/3 column, but did not give them, didn't load a thumbnail. So this might be nice for a portfolio if maybe these are all individual pieces, and maybe one's like, maybe it's packaging. So you have a large image here, and then when you click on it, you see that large image, like the full packaging, and then you can scroll through and maybe see details of that design without filling this screen with all those detail shots. You can have tons of images under here. Probably, I don't even know if there would be a limit, without having to fill this screen with all those detail shots. So again, that's by putting them all in a 1/3 column. They all live in the same column, letting only that first one have an image as a thumbnail. The other ones have no content wrapped in their anchor tags. and they all have the data, the same data lightbox. And then, if you wanted, you could, still within that row, I could create another 1/3 column. Let's call this image set. I'm going to call them image set 3 right off the bat. Before I forget, I'm going to come in here, sort of delete, put different images in. Grumpy _thumb, and this one's tricky because it's a JPEG with an E in it, so you always have to remember that. And you know what? Just for the sake of time, I'm not going to load new images. I'm just going to swap them. So different order, but you'll get the idea. So now image set 3, but only one has an image. Save, reload. There's my image. I click on that, and I can see the ones that are underneath. So these could all be projects, and then each project opens up sub images that you cannot see here. So that can be a very nice effect. Two last things to show you. One is really just not specific to this plugin, but just a reminder of what you can do with styles. If you did want to change the look, border radius 100%. You have these kind of controls. Again, what's nice, because these are square things, it naturally lends itself to becoming circles. And again, because we're using skeleton, shrinks down quite well. And obviously you can add borders and effects like hover effects. You can even look at hover effects and transitions that you could add to this. So really anything that you want. Should I do that? Maybe I should do a transition, throw a transition on there. Thumbnail, hover. I don't know. Filter. I never really looked at a lot of these. Maybe it'll look weird. Blur. I wonder if it's like, I've never really used the blur one. So let's take a look. Blur 5. Don't even see the effect. Maybe it's percentage. I don't use the blur. Maybe it's pixels. Maybe I should just stick with one that I know. What do I know? Filter, contrast. If we just did a little bit. Just a little subtle one. Ooh, that's subtle. That's nice. And like anything that we saw, you can obviously also put the transition on it. There we go. So we just treat these as normal HTML and CSS elements, and the JavaScript is going to do its own thing. It's unrelated to that. So we can style these as much as we want. Just by making them links, it triggers the JavaScript to run. Speaking of which, there's one more adjustment we can make, or one more thing we can add to this to refine it even a little bit more. So the developer of this JavaScript allows us to essentially change some of the settings of the effect. So a good starting point is to actually, if you go to the developer site, which is, I believe, linked to on eCentennial, but if you Google Lightbox 2, you'll generally find it. And it has some instructions. This is where you can install the code itself. It tells you how to link it, which we've already looked at. How to structure when you load an image, and talks about image sets, everything that we've seen here. But then we can add options as well. So best thing to do is to copy and paste this, navigate to that site. I won't bother reading out that URL, but Google Lightbox 2 and look for this site. Come down to this section where it says options, and there's a little code snippet there. Copy that, go back down to the bottom of our page where I've loaded the script. And after the script is loaded, paste that little code snippet. And it sort of explains here, it's not written super clearly, so it might take some time to experiment and figure it out, but I should say it's not written super clearly, but like it does have a good definitions here, but you're kind of working with code here. So basically you're turning maybe things on and off. You can control like how quickly the image resizes, how quickly the image fades in and out. You can control max width. You can control various things. So let me, I know it also says what's good here is what the default is. So let's look at resize duration. So the default of resize duration is 700. So I'm going to return here. I'm going to leave this at 700. So you have to put this code in exactly as it is online, because it's in JavaScript, so the formatting is critical. One thing to notice is there's no comma after this entry, the second entry. There's a comma after the first, but not the second. And let me just look at one more thing. So wrap around, the default is normally false. So I'm actually going to set this, I'm going to set both of these back to the default. His example, he has changed. So this is the default. Save that. When I come here and reload, I won't see any changes because I've put that code, the snippet of code in to start changing things, but I've left at the default. So I'm going to make changes to those two things. The resize duration, I'm going to dramatically lower that. So let's just look one more time. I'm here. You can see how that box has to resize for these different size images. And it's kind of slow. It's a little sluggish. Another thing to notice is when I get to the last image in a set, I can only go back. Right? I go 1, 2, 3, and then I can go 2 and 1, and that's all I can do. I can only go to the ends. So returning to this the script options, I pasted that in. These are the defaults. So if I deleted all this code, it would look exactly like that is, because that is the default. I'm going to change that 700 to 100. And I'm going to change the wraparound value to true and not false. Save that, reload. So that JavaScript is going to reload. And now let's see. That resizes quite fast. It's jarring, I would say. So maybe that's a little too fast. And also, so that's the resize duration. Let's just slow that down a bit because it's going to give me a headache. Reload a bit, reload once. Okay, it's still pretty fast, but I'll leave it. And the other thing to note is when I get to that third image, because I have that wrap around set to true now, now I have an arrow to the next. And now I'm going back to that first image in that set. And that first image has a back. So now those carousels or those sets, whatever we want to call them, wrap around in circles. As you can see, even with those little hidden ones that we created. So you can go in here and see all the different options. Another one that's sort of interesting is maybe max width. So I'm going to put a comma now because I'm going to put a new line in. So I'm going to put a comma in. And now, what did he say? You might have to refer to the website, max uppercase width. So obviously it's case sensitive. So max width. And we're going to put probably a pixel amount in here. Let's say I'm going to keep these small for whatever reason. 400 pixels will be the maximum width. So of all those images, it won't go any larger than 400 pixels. Again, because this is the last entry, I'm not putting a comma. Load. Oh, and now it's very tiny. But what's interesting is, it's kind of nice. It's very tiny, but they're all consistent. It's starting to feel a little nicer now. Now, again, you could do that in Photoshop. You could resize them all in Photoshop, but and maybe that would be the best way. But if not, it's nice to be able to just come in here and set a variable. Of course, that's a single. That will, I see that's interesting. That one's shrinking because it must be smaller than 700. So I'm only telling it to do, it's a maximum width. So anything smaller is going to run like that. It's running its true width, which is obviously less than 700. But those are both the exact same width. So definitely options to play with. I don't think he's given us minimum width, which is unfortunate, but then I can understand why. There's things you can do with where it says like 1 of 2 images. You can affect the fade duration. You can affect the position on the screen. Various things that you can control. So, and you enter that all in the script kind of options after you've loaded the script itself. So that would be a key point as well. So that is one example of a JavaScript, pre-written JavaScript. I'm going to call it a plugin or a file that is available to you to download, to install. There's hundreds of them out there and they'd all be slightly different, but a good one would have some good documentation and instructions online. But a lot of the core concepts are going to be the same. Having to load the JavaScript itself onto the page, having the JavaScript included with your web files or hosted and you're linking to it externally, but you have to load it onto the page. And you're most likely going to be loading other files along with it. In this case, we saw we had to load the CSS specifically for that JavaScript. And then how you work with that JavaScript that's really going to vary from script to script. But this one we saw it's creating where the images that we want to open in this lightbox effect are treated as anchor tags, and so we link to them. We always make sure we pay attention to this field, the data lightbox, because we can use it to control if we want images to be completely independent or being able to cycle through them. Loading Thumbnails is something I would strongly recommend, creating and loading those thumbnails and having them be consistently sized. So you're going to get better performance, better load times. I mean, here's an example. Here we are right now. There are, what are we at? 8 images. If those are all higher res images, it's going to start affecting our load time. So going to the effort upfront to create thumbnails, also allowing us to control, making them all consistently sized, and being able to control the crop of them might be nice too. We looked at how we can create sets. We looked at how we can sort of create hidden sets, which might be a nice feature. And then finally, we looked at what options this particular script gives us and how we can load them and control them. So good luck, enjoy, and yeah, hope you have a great week.